Have you ever felt like something was off, but you couldn't explain why? I've felt that. And for a long time, I thought the problem was outside of me. Situations, people, circumstances. That's what I thought I was fighting. But I started to realize something wasn't adding up, because even when things changed, that feeling didn't go away. And that's when it hit me. The real battle wasn't happening around me. It was happening inside. Not just emotionally, but spiritually. And even psychologically. It's like there's a whole inner world that most of us never really stop to look at. When I started reading scripture properly and actually sitting with it, I noticed something. The Bible keeps pointing back to the heart, not the physical heart, but the inner life. There's a moment in Genesis where God says something to Cain. Sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. That line stayed with me, because it suggests something very real. It's like there's a doorway inside you, and something is always trying to enter, not physically, but through your thoughts, your reactions, your emotions. And I started to see this isn't just about behavior, it's about what's influencing you before you even act. Paul talks about this as well. He describes a tension between what he calls the flesh and the spirit. And when I read that, it didn't feel theoretical. It felt familiar, because if I'm honest, I've felt that pull, that internal conflict, where part of you wants to do what's right, and another part pulls you somewhere else. That's when I came across this idea from early Christianity about something called the passions. And at first, I thought they just meant emotions, but it's deeper than that. The way they described it was that these are energies inside you, things like anger, desire, drive, hunger. And none of those are bad on their own. They're actually part of being human. But when they lose direction or control, something changes. They start to distort how you see things, how you react, how you think. And that's when they stop being neutral and start becoming forces. Forces that influence you and can even begin to take over if you're not aware. But even that wasn't the root. There was something underneath all of it. And I started noticing this in my own life. Something deeper. Insecurity. Not surface-level insecurity. Something more internal, more quiet, like a kind of instability in how you see yourself. Because when that's there, everything starts to shift. You compare more, you overthink more, you react more, you become more defensive, more sensitive, more easily affected. The best way I can describe it now is like a crack. Not a doorway, but a weakness. Something that makes everything else easier to enter. And from that place, things start to grow. You might try to compensate by appearing stronger than you feel, or you start resenting people who seem to have what you don't, or you turn inward and feel like something's wrong with you, like you're not enough, like you keep falling short. And once I saw that, it started connecting everything, the reactions, the thoughts, the patterns I kept repeating. Because if insecurity is there, everything else becomes louder. Temptation feels stronger, negative thoughts feel more believable, and your ability to resist feels weaker. But here's what started to change things for me. As I got closer to God, something began to shift. Not instantly, but gradually, over time. That insecurity started to weaken, and as it weakened, everything else started losing strength too, which made me realize something simple, but important. If the root begins to heal, everything else starts to follow. So the real question isn't just, what are you struggling with? It's, what's underneath it? Because once you start seeing that clearly, you start understanding the real battle. At the end of the video, I'd be genuinely interested to hear how many people have experienced this same inner conflict and how you've been dealing with it. But for now, let's dive back in and see whether there's actually a solution. Sometimes, the battle inside you becomes so loud that you begin searching for relief anywhere you can find it. Distraction, pleasure, noise, achievement, validation, constant stimulation. But eventually, you realize none of it truly brings peace. Because the real battle was never only outside of you, it was happening within you the entire time. Last year, I reached a point where I genuinely asked God for help. Not casually, not intellectually, honestly. I wanted to understand how to walk with God more deeply, how to become more disciplined, more aware, more at peace, how to become less controlled by impulse, emotion, pride, anger, distraction, and fear. And over time, through prayer, through silence, through fasting, considered the weapon of the soul, through solitude, through reflection, through studying scripture, through observing my own thoughts honestly, something slowly began to change. Not instantly, gradually. I started realizing how much of modern life keeps the mind noisy. Constant stimulation, constant scrolling, constant comparison, constant emotional reaction. And when the mind never becomes quiet, you stop noticing what controls you. You stop noticing your patterns. You stop noticing your weaknesses. You stop noticing the passions forming beneath the surface. Anger, pride, vanity, resentment, lust, fear, self-pity, distraction, insecurity. These things rarely arrive all at once. They grow slowly, quietly, repeatedly, often through the smallest compromises, the smallest agreements, the smallest unconscious habits. One of the most important things I learned was the power of stillness, real stillness, not entertainment disguised as relaxation, not escaping into distractions, but sitting quietly long enough to observe yourself honestly, to notice your thoughts, to notice your reactions, to notice the things that trigger you emotionally, to notice what repeatedly pulls your attention. The ancient Christians called this watchfulness, watching the inner world carefully, because if you do not observe your thoughts eventually begin controlling you, and most people never realize it's happening. Fasting also became extremely important for me, not as punishment, not as performance, but as discipline, as interruption, as a way of weakening compulsive behavior. Because when you fast, you begin seeing how much control your impulses actually have over you, how quickly the body demands comfort, pleasure, stimulation, relief. And every time you calmly deny those impulses, something inside you becomes stronger, clearer, more disciplined. You begin realizing, I do not have to obey every urge that appears inside me. That changes you, spiritually, mentally, emotionally. Solitude became important too, because constant noise weakens self-awareness. When you are always surrounded by opinions, content, voices, music, notifications, you rarely hear yourself clearly, and sometimes you rarely hear God clearly either. There is something about silence, real silence, that exposes what is unresolved inside you. At first, that can feel uncomfortable, because distractions disappear, and suddenly you are left alone with your thoughts. But eventually, that silence becomes peaceful, not empty, peaceful. Prayer also changed for me. Not performative prayer, not repeating words mechanically. Real prayer, honest prayer, surrender, conversation. Sometimes sitting quietly with God, without trying to impress Him, without pretending to be spiritually perfect, just honestly present. And strangely, that honesty itself begins healing something, because hiding weakens the soul, but truth strengthens it. I'd be very interested to hear whether practices like prayer, fasting, discipline, or alignment with God have helped bring greater peace into your life. For now, let's continue, because there's still more we need to explore. Another thing I realized was that healing is usually slower than people want. Most people want immediate transformation, immediate peace, immediate freedom, but most inner change happens gradually, quietly, like rebuilding a structure from the foundation upward. You begin noticing, your reactions soften, your anger shortens, your mind becomes quieter, your cravings weaken, your awareness strengthens, your need for validation decreases, your emotions stop controlling you as easily, and little by little, the things that once dominated you begin losing power. I also realized that many of the passions are rooted in insecurity, the need to appear superior, the need to be admired, the fear of rejection, the fear of inadequacy, the constant comparison to others. And the closer I moved toward God, the less powerful those things became. Not because I became perfect, but because identity slowly became more stable. You stop needing constant approval from the world when your identity is no longer fully dependent on the world. That changes the way you think, the way you react, the way you live. Something else that helped me greatly was learning not to immediately identify with every thought that appeared in my mind. Not every thought is wisdom. Not every emotion is truth. Not every impulse deserves agreement. Some thoughts should simply be observed and allowed to pass. The more aware you become, the more space forms between you and the things trying to control your attention. That space is powerful, because inside that space, you regain choice. And honestly, this process is still ongoing for me. I am still learning, still observing myself, still growing, still failing sometimes, still correcting myself. But I genuinely believe these practices helped me become more peaceful, more disciplined, more aware, more grounded, and spiritually stronger than I was before. Not through fear, not through obsession, but through awareness, stillness, discipline, prayer, fasting, reflection, watchfulness, and gradually learning not to feed the things that weaken the soul. The truth is, the battle may never disappear completely, but you can absolutely become stronger than the patterns that once controlled you. You can become more aware of yourself, more disciplined with your attention, more careful about what you feed mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And over time, the noise begins to quiet down. The mind settles, the spirit strengthens, and the doorway that once stood wide open slowly begins to close. Not all at once, but little by little, day by day, choice by choice. And maybe that journey toward awareness, discipline, peace, and closeness to God is one of the most important journeys a person can ever take. I'd genuinely be interested to hear whether any part of this journey resonated with your own life, and whether practices like stillness, prayer, discipline, or alignment with God have helped bring greater peace into your inner world. For now, take care of yourself, protect your peace,